G'day everybody, how you going today? It is so good to see you. I do hope that you are super well. We're here again in the Outback testing another lens. This one is a full frame autofocus 75mm f2 from TTArtisans. It is for Z mount and E mount. Now this lens, it comes in at the very affordable end of the spectrum. And when it comes to how I look at lenses, review lenses, I do base it on where they are in the hierarchy of lenses. Is it an absolute entry-level lens? Is it, say, entry-level first-party lens? Is it a mid-level first-party lens? Or is it a absolute top-of-the-line lens? And then we have probably another category in there, which is the two categories of the larger lens makers like Tamron and Sigma. They will kind of have their entry-level lines as well as their high-end lines. And now we're seeing with the Chinese manufacturers, they are also creating tiers of lenses. So if we put all those tiers together, there could be as many as, say, I don't know, 7 or 8 tiers of lenses. Now, there's absolutely no point me comparing, let's say, and let's talk about this, say, in car terms, a $20,000 or $25,000 car with a $75,000 car or a $135,000 car. Yes, all cars get you from A to B. That's absolutely true. Just like all lenses will capture you an image. But when you pay more, well, they do it with more finesse, more accuracy, more precision, more refinement. And there's absolutely no point me saying an entry-level car is no good compared to a middle tier or top of the range car. That goes without saying. The price tells us that there will be differences, and it's absolutely the same with lenses. And when it comes to entry-level lenses, again, we do know what we're getting ourselves into if we decide to buy lenses on an absolute budget. And thus, we have to review if it's a budget lens relative to budget lenses. All right, let's get into the 75mm f2. And just before I show you a little bit about what this lens looks like, the buttons, dials, switches, rings, and so on, we are shooting on the 75mm f2 right now on the Z8 in 8K. How are we doing? Let's talk about the construction of this lens. It does have a USB-C port here on the lens cap, and that allows you to update the firmware on the lens. Of course, the only problem with this type of design is if you lose the cap, you can't upgrade the firmware, so you'd have to get a new cap. It's all metal, so it feels great. It feels solid. It has a nicely dampened focus ring and a clicking aperture ring, which of course takes you from the f2 all the way around to f16 and then onto auto, allows you to control the aperture from the camera. Now, I do like this lens hood. It's actually a little bit rectangular. That's always a good vibe, makes you feel cool. It's a 62mm filter thread, and all up, it's a great little construction. There's no sign of a rubber gasket there at the edge, so I think if there is weather sealing, it is very, very minimal, or perhaps it's not there at all. Autofocus is snappy. I think it's great for this class of lens, an absolute entry-level lens. But as for the images, let's take a look in Capture One. But it's a shard of light coming out of the top of the cloud, and it's starting to look foggy because we've got heavy rainfall. 1/1600th of a second handheld. Shooting on the Nikon Z8 firmware 2.01 on the TTArtisan 75mm f2. And this is from my Central Australia trip. As we can see here, there are some inland beaches in inverted commas. These are very large watering holes, which basically are the closest you get to a beach when you're something like 1,000 miles from the nearest ocean, 1,000 miles or more. This is the 75mm wide open, as we can see down here at the bottom with the metadata. It's 64 ISO 1/1600th of a second at f2. Now the focus was here on these trees in the center of frame, and if we go into 100%,
I think that looks pretty good. We're shooting in high efficiency star, and as we can see, the background, which is a long way away, is a little bit out of focus and does get a little bit jittery. Yes, it looks soft. It's supposed to be soft. It's out of focus. The trees do not. A bird flew overhead. If anybody knows what type of bird this is, please let me know. We can see that it is nicely in focus at 100%. We're shooting at 1/3200th of a second, again, wide open. I think this looks sharp. It looks great in the center of frame. What we can see in this image is vignetting. On the corners of the frame, there is a little bit of darkness. In real terms, that's really not something that we have to worry about anymore, because it's as simple as this to correct these sorts of issues. And for us who've been in photography prior to the mirrorless age, vignetting was common on almost every lens. Another image of the bird. It's gotten slightly closer. We can see it a little bit bigger in frame. I think it's working absolutely fantastically. This is the full 45.7 megapixels. This file has been untouched. Let's bring up the shadows a little bit, bring up the color a little bit, and this is probably more true to life, more to what I saw with my eye. A very bright day, and I just think this lens is doing a great job of representing what's in front of you. Now, I just have to repeat, this is a $179 lens. This is an extraordinarily affordable lens. Here we are at 100% looking at an Australian native dog known as the Dingo. Beautiful animals, and again, I think that's looking very sharp in the fur. This was an overcast day, center of frame, but I do think it's looking really good. Same animal again, we're pixel for pixel, 100%. And another Australian native, which is the emu. I took a lot of shots of this guy, and there you go. There's one where he was a little bit closer and in focus. We'll just go out to the full frame. But at 100%, I think that's all looking very sharp and very good. And I just did the tiniest of little masks there, because these animals have very dark eyes. So I was just bringing the eye up a little bit, which would allow me to bring the whole frame brightness down a little bit, and I feel that that might look better. We want to see the animal's eyes. This is an APS-C image. We're dealing with 19.4 megapixels on the 75mm lens, and using this on APS-C, the field of view equivalent is a 112.5mm field of view. So not really a super long focal length, but giving us a great result. And when we go in pixel for pixel, I just think that's looking really, really great. Now, of course, we saw how this lens works for portraiture or for human faces, for video, talking headshots. In my opening monologue, the first minute or so there is from this lens. I think it's performing really well. And if we look at the detail here in this hair, obviously it's the center of frame, but we are wide open. We're at 100% here. I think that's a lot of detail and hair. Look, you can't go wrong with this lens at this price point. Let's keep in mind, it's fully autofocus, fully aperture remote controlled, full metadata, EXIF data coming through. It's small, it's light, it's tough. And probably the only downside of this lens is lack of weather sealing. Otherwise, I think it's a winner at this price point. I've done almost nothing in the way of changing the file other than bringing the shadows up a little bit in order to bring the emu's eyes up. There is no mask here. We could perhaps bring up the saturation a bit just to bring a bit more life. The sun was coming in and out of behind the clouds at this particular moment, and sometimes you just need that little bit of extra saturation to offset the fact that it might be quite a grey day. Now we'll look at some cityscape images shot back here in Melbourne. Now, very windy. What we'll do is we'll drag this to minimum focus so we can see what the bokeh looks like in this particular situation. Now, in the middle of the frame, we can see it's very round, but I deliberately panned so we can see the shapes becoming more oval as we go to the edges. That's exactly what you would expect from a lens that's $179. This is a dynamic situation, probably not harsh enough to create any fringing. I think it looks good, it renders well. Beautiful sunset happening here, some beautiful light rays. very much with these files. Just brought up the shadows a little bit and a little bit of contrast so that you can see what's going on there. Now, one thing I found shooting this lens back here in Melbourne, which is a subject I know much better than the Outback, because that was actually my first visit to the Outback. I really like the 75mm focal length. Sometimes 85 can just be a smidge too long. 75 is really a valid alternative, which I quite like. I do like this image. I would probably do a mask along the bottom here just to bring those bottom areas up a little bit. Just do a really quick, not very good one. This is not going to be good at all. But it just gives you an idea of how you can change an image. Yeah, that'd be worth doing properly. But the lens looks great. Now these are tiny, tiny, tiny point lights way off in the distance. We're at 100% here. This is at the bottom, not quite the corner, but it is sort of the bottom corner. Look, I think that's looking pretty good. I don't exactly know what those lights are at this distance. All of the ropes here on these masts on this older ship, they're rendering pretty well. We are at 1/500th f2. So this is wide open for this lens. If we look across here, we can see that this bird is nice and sharp. We are at 100% pixel for pixel. Now, this is the corner right here. I definitely think the lens is getting a little bit softer. Just a little bit. We are wide open, fair enough. And there's perhaps a little bit more distortion in there and the way that it's treating those lights. And we can see the smallest amount of fringing, but I'm at 500% now. Overall, though, great result. Like, if you're not pixel peeping, I mean, look at that. We were way, that's 500%. So we were filling the frame with this bridge, okay, to find its faults. And they're there, but they're very minor. And that's what we're looking at. So we've got to keep it real, man. Similar image again. This is a bit more central, I think, and that's pixel for pixel. I think for handling such small point lights and also how all of this is being rendered, all of these ropes and so on, I do think that's a good result there in the center of frame. Yeah, I reckon it does get a little bit softer in the corners, but we are at f2. This is $179. What do you expect? I think it's a great result relative to where it fits in the market. Colors are great too. A little bit of fringing, but we are at 300%. At 100%, it's almost impossible to see. And then it does reduce. But the differences are pretty minor, so this lens is working quite well. Interesting. I think this lens performs really well. We can see that that is definitely sharp at 100%. Handheld at night, 1/15th. There's 100%. All of that's rendering nicely. Is it the ultra sharpness we get out of S-class lenses? Maybe not, but it's still sharp, which is interesting. It's not that it's not sharp. It's probably a little tiny bit to do with contrast. It doesn't feel like it's lacking, if that makes sense. It just feels like it has less contrast, but it's a minor difference. And ultimately, that's a subjective difference between users, and then, of course, in post, you can tickle a little bit more contrast in there and offset that by a little bit of shadow, and like we were at 100%. But that looks sharp to me. The records look sharp, or whatever those brochures. It's very sharp, center of frame, and the fall off on the edges, whatever that might be, it's all good. This is 1/8 of a second handheld on the Z8, 64 ISO at night. The sun is absolutely gone down. Yes, Z8. It shows that this lens is very capable. It can do nightscapes, landscapes, cityscapes. It can do the outback. It can do portraiture and everything in between. There's that neon looking beautiful. Yeah, I really like how that is rendered. It looks very, very natural. It really, really looks very, very natural. That is a great result. I'm really impressed. I know these sorts of situations very well. And yeah, the detail here in the old sign. ISO 64, 1/15th, f2, 75mm on the Z8 handheld. Again, here I'm just trying to show sharpness and fall off. Very nice. It does look very cinematic. Interesting. This could be a very nice cinematic lens. And this is what out of focus areas look like. Good color. Now what's interesting here is I have not increased saturation. So you could go harder if you wanted to, but you don't need to. There it is, out of the box. Yeah, TTArtisan have done a great job with this lens. Now we can see here that the bokeh, as we get towards the edges, is not round. Doesn't bother me at all. I really like that bokeh. Nothing spectacular here, but just showing you what the lens can do. This is on the Z8 in DX, and I was just trying to find some direct sunlight, which this is. We can see that just for a sec. And there is really no sign of fringing in this particular shot. It's pretty well suppressed with this lens, I would say, with the shots that we've seen. As you can see, I was shooting these shots, and this guy, he ran through frame. I squeezed one off. And even so, the horizon's not level. I really like it as a composition. It could be changed in lots of different ways. It's just a lovely human moment. Basically, we had the sun, we had the rain. It was unseasonably warm, and yeah, it's just evocative. So handling that well. Now, of course, always water is the impossible. And in here, we can see when we're in at 200%, and we can go to 100% because we can still see it. Signs of purple and green fringing. This is the most extreme, the most harsh thing that we can do. It's there. Look, it's easy to remove. I'll show you a trick if you don't know this trick. You can draw a mask here. Just a little mask. We'll show the mask. And there's the mask. Let alone the fact that I haven't used the fringing tool. First we'll turn the mask off and we'll use the fringing tool. Doesn't help a lot in this situation, but what you do is you desaturate it. Often this happens in monochromatic areas of your image, this sort of stuff. So I've pulled all the color out of there. You can't tell because it's in a monochromatic area and the purple fringing's gone. Looks nice. So very easy to fix. This is almost the only place we've seen it in all of this lens's performance. I think it does a great job. This is just a quick demonstration of one way you can solve this problem if you find that the water looks too monochromatic there. And I think this probably does. So I'll show you a quick fix. What we do is we turn this up to say something like 75%, which really doesn't change what it looks like. But then we go to the color balance. And here we just basically want to add more of that tone, which as we can see, it's sort of a mid-orange sort of tone, and there you have it. And if you look at the difference without it and then with it, now to get the most accurate representation of this, you need to be pixel for pixel to see how it renders, because if you zoom out, it looks messy. It's not rendering pixel for pixel, and this is just putting a little bit of color back into this image. Now you can decide how much, how little, whether it needs more or less. You could decrease the saturation further, and you can also change the intensity here, and all of these things will make a little bit of a difference. You can work out what works best for you, but obviously that is not monochromatic. We're getting some color back in there. Something that's subjective, you can play with it to match your artistic goals. Just a really moody, beautiful afternoon. I would probably bring this foreground up just a tiny amount. So we're drawing a mask here as I used to do in the darkroom. Lots of dodging and burning. Do that, you can see it there. And then just ever so gently, just a little bit, nothing too serious. Bring that up as much as you might see fit. Add a little bit of color in there to offset the fact that it used to be quite dark. That's too much. Something really subtle. And maybe you prefer that, and maybe you don't. Let me know in the comments below. I'm not sure. Then I moved to clear the foreground from those volleyball nets. Obviously the sun had now moved on, which was, not quite what I wanted, but so be it. Can't control that. Let's bring that color down a bit. Yeah, it's a lovely, very evocative That's what this lens is capable of. Like I said before, I really enjoyed shooting in 75mm. I think that works. It's a totally valid focal length, one that's probably not used very much. I'm not aware of many 75mm lenses in my time as a photographer. I've never had one before. Ultimately, the summation of this lens is it probably doesn't focus quite as assuredly as Nikon first-party lenses. It's not as sharp in the corners as the S-class lenses when wide open, but stop it down a little bit and that's fine. And also, fringing seems to be suppressed really well with this lens, so that's a great result. So overall, I think based on its f-stops, focal length, and then couple that with the price, I think this is actually, and let's not forget it's an autofocus lens, I think it's really good value for what it is, and I will continue to test it. I will probably do a video where I put it up against the 85mm 1.8S, slightly different focal lengths, 10 mils difference, but I think we'll be able to get a vibe for it. That's probably the best lens I can test it against. Maybe some of the Viltrox lenses might be a good idea. The Viltrox 85 1.8, maybe even my old F-mount 85 1.4. We will see. All right, back to me.
All right, everybody. Well, as you can see, I think for the price that this lens is, it's giving us a great outcome. We're always looking for opportunities to have different lenses in our kits. We can have pro level lenses if we want the best of the best, or we are actually a professional. And then for some of us, you might just want a travel lens. And who's this lens for? Well, this is exactly what this lens is for. It is small, it's relatively light, even so it's an all metal construction. I think it's tough and well made. I like the way all this stuff feels good. The focus is pretty strong. It can jitter a little bit compared to Z lenses. That sometimes happens with these third-party lenses. This is not a macro lens. The minimum focus distance is 75 centimeters, which is something around 2¼ to 2⅓ feet. That's okay. It's not what it's for. It's not what it's priced for. I think if you want to get into something that's similar to an 85mm 1.8, yet this is a 75 f2, all those numbers are very similar. You're not going to see a big difference between them. This is just a really great option, but it is an entry-level option. You've always got to keep that in mind. We've talked about the quality when we were looking at the images in Capture One. As Z users and E-mount owners, we just get more and more options of lenses that we can shoot with and different price points. And I've been looking at these third-party Chinese lenses now for something like 4 to 5 years, and I can tell you they are just getting incrementally better and better. So they are good options. Please do let me know in the comments below, what do you think of the TTArtisan's 75 f2 for Z mount, and would this be a lens that you would consider getting? All right, it's been so good to see you, and if this is your first time here, I would love to see you again, so please do subscribe, please share, and please like. Okay, bye for now.